Hello, and thank you very much for joining me again today. This is the second session in our course on logistics execution with warehouse management, a very powerful SAP solution, powerful SAP module. And today we're going to be looking at goods receipt processes. And under that, we're going to look at the creation of transfer orders for put away, as well as the different ways to set up put away strategies. But before we get into today's business, we're just going to take a brief moment to recap on what we went through in the last video, in the last session. And if you haven't gone through that already, I just recommend that you go through it first, because it's very important just to make sure that you have the basics, that you grasp the basics first before attempting to get into some of the more complicated areas of this module. So in the first video, we covered three very important facets of this course, which is firstly, we looked at what exactly logistics execution is by definition. We also went on to look at the organizational units in logistics execution, and we also looked at the master data relevant to logistics execution. We looked at logistics execution as a part of a larger suite of integrating components. And we also touched briefly on how logistics execution acts as a bridge between procurement and distribution. And we also looked at how it supports the processes of other key modules in logistics. So that was the basic structure of the first lesson. And if you would, the best way to go about this is to make sure that you really get these basics at your fingertips. Because as we get deeper and deeper, some terms may become increasingly confusing if you haven't taken time to really understand the basics. So that was it for the first video, the first session. And so now let's look at what we have for you today. So to begin with in this lecture, we are going to look at the organizational structure for warehouse management. And in our previous session, we did look at the logistics execution organizational units, which were namely the warehouse number, the shipping point, and the transportation planning point, all these distinct organizational units that serve different purposes. But in this session, we're going to go in depth and look at the warehouse management organization structure, which has the warehouse number as the highest organizational unit. So this is sort of an expansion from the logistics execution organization structure. We had the warehouse number as one of those units. So we're just going to start by expanding this structure, looking at the organizational units that fall underneath the warehouse number. So the warehouse number, as we said in the last session, is the highest organizational unit in warehouse management, and it represents a warehouse complex, a warehouse building, the actual physical warehouse that an organization is managing using the SAP warehouse management solution. So that's the warehouse number right at the top of the structure. That's where it sits, and it represents a physical warehouse building, or a warehouse complex, if you will. Directly below that, we have what we call storage types. This is the second level in the warehouse management organization structure. And now these storage types, they represent distinct storage spaces. For example, in a warehouse, some warehouses have separate storage types, in the sense that one storage type may be perhaps a high rack storage. Another storage type in that same warehouse may be bulk storage, and different types of storage that we find in a warehouse. So a storage type basically separates storage spaces in a warehouse based on different storage requirements. So perhaps some materials cannot be stored in bulk, maybe for reasons of their fragile nature. So they have a different storage type. You'll find that in the SAP system, there are storage types that have already been predefined, but you can also go ahead and define your own depending on the actual warehouse scenario that you have. Different storage types can be defined in the SAP system, and these are used to account for differing storage requirements. The third level in our organization structure here are what we call storage sections. And storage sections are defined within storage types. They basically offer you an option, or they allow you to further partition your space in the warehouse. So first of all, we've partitioned our space according to storage type, separate storage types, and now we have the opportunity to partition that space further according to storage sections. Now, storage sections are mandatory organizational units, and they are defined within a storage type. And now these are created as a means of further partitioning storage spaces. A good example of a storage section would be maybe in our bulk storage type. We have goods that go in there that need to be refrigerated. And so we have within the storage type bulk storage, we have a storage section refrigerated for our goods. And in that same storage type bulk storage, we have a normal room temperature section. So now what we've done is we've further subdivided our storage type into refrigerated and room temperature storage sections. You can come up with as many storage sections as required, but remember, these are mandatory organizational units, meaning that within your storage type, you need to have at least one storage section, even if there is no specific requirement to further subdivide your storage type. You still have to have at least one storage section within your storage type. It's very mandatory. And as you can see there, we have what we also call a picking area. Now, a picking area is also at the same level as our storage section, but it differs in that a picking area offers us the opportunity to divide the space in a storage type, but now specifically for purposes of goods removal. We'll get into this in detail at a future time, but this is just what it's important to note at this point, that a picking area is at the same, it's an optional organizational unit at the same level as a storage section, but it differs in that it divides up the space in a storage type specifically for the purpose of goods removal processes, meaning we're removing goods from our shelves. It could be a shelf, it could be a particular floor, or whatever it is. It divides up the space on which we store those goods during the removal process. It's not a mandatory organizational unit to maintain, and we'll look at it in greater detail at a future point. And the next organizational level in our warehouse management organization structure is the storage bin. Now, the storage bin differs from all the other organizational units that we've been looking at in the sense that the warehouse number, storage type, and storage section are all defined in customizing. These are back-end definitions. This is what we do at the back end for warehouse management. But the storage bins are classified as master data, meaning this can be done in the front end. And these storage bins are created within storage sections. And the thing about storage bins is that there are two types. Storage bins can be made for mixed storage or for non-mixed storage. We'll get into detail on these in future, but one thing to catch is that they also offer us a increased flexibility in partitioning or classifying our storage spaces. For example, in our storage bins, we can limit the weight that can be loaded into a particular storage bin. We can limit the dimensions as well. We can state within what we call a storage bin type, we can state the maximum dimensional capacity that a particular storage bin can accommodate. For example, we can say this one is 3 meters by 3 meters. We can state a volume. These allow us to further partition our storage sections. We're now looking at the actual place in which our product actually sits, and we are placing dimensions or generally criteria that will allow us to limit and control what exactly and how much of a particular material can be loaded into these particular storage bins. Now, we're going to take a look at inventory management and warehouse management. are two different stock management solutions, and they each have different capabilities that offer us different functionalities in our stock management. These can work together to give us a highly integrated approach to stock management, but when used separately, they have their distinct strengths and weaknesses. We're not going to go in depth in looking at those right now, but we're just going to touch briefly on the differences. So firstly, when we look at inventory management, which is also a component of materials management, we realize that stock is managed at storage location level. Now, when we manage stock at storage location level, we mainly look at our stock with respect to quantities available in storage. Now, with warehouse management, stock is not managed only at storage location level, but it is managed at what we call storage bin level. Storage bins, which we have defined, which we defined earlier on in this session. And now, when managing stock at storage bin level, we are able to actually pinpoint the exact location. When we create storage bins, we are able to define coordinates for that particular storage bin, meaning that we're able to tell exactly where in the warehouse particular stock is stored. So that's the difference between inventory management and warehouse management. We find that in inventory management, we're only able to tell how much stock is left, but in warehouse management, we're also able to go a step further and actually tell where exactly the remaining stock is located. Storage locations in inventory management basically have no limit to the amount of stock that can be stored within them. This makes it very difficult to track limits, because in a practical situation, we don't have infinite storage capacity, but we actually have limits that we need to observe in order to give us an accurate overview of the situation within a warehouse. With warehouse management, however, you are able to account for capacity and volume-based limits. This gives us a very superior ability to manage space within a warehouse, because we are able to track how much space we have remaining and how much space has been used. Now, having explored the unique advantages and strengths that inventory management and warehouse management have to offer as standalone solutions, it's key to note at this point that these two solutions actually have a very powerful integration point. Let me explain further. We have in SAP what we call plants. This is the organizational unit under which we find storage locations. Now, plants can represent different things. They are very generic organizational units, meaning a plant can represent a production facility or simply a storage warehouse, for example, depending on the use. In SAP, for example, production planning may use a plant to represent a production facility, whereas materials management may use a plant to represent a building used for storage, for storing stock. And now within this plant, we then create what we call storage locations, as we've looked at in inventory management. And within these storage locations is where we find our stock quantities. Now, in SAP, we have the ability to assign a plant and a combination of plant and storage location to our warehouse number. Now, when we assign a plant and storage location to a warehouse number, this represents a key integration between inventory management and warehouse management. And now when this assignment is made, it means that storage locations are now what we call warehouse managed. So the storage locations that were just simple storage locations under inventory management, when we've made the plant storage location to warehouse number assignment, these storage locations become warehouse managed. And this assignment unlocks a wealth of warehouse management features and functionalities. For example, Now when our storage locations are warehouse managed, after we've made this assignment, we find that stock management is now possible at bin level, at storage bin level, meaning that now we are able to pinpoint the actual location of stock within our warehouse. We also enjoy improved picking control. Picking basically represents the movement of goods, the collection of goods from a storage point and moving them to another point, whether for as goods removal or internal transfer. And so with this assignment, we can enjoy improved picking control. For example, we can have two-step picking, which enables us to pick a large quantity from storage bins at first, and this large quantity can then later be assigned in smaller quantities to corresponding outbound deliveries. This functionality is not possible with inventory management alone, but once we've made the assignment of a plant and storage location to a warehouse number, this marries our inventory management to warehouse management. Now that we're managing stock at a storage bin level, after having integrated inventory management with warehouse management, we come to an interesting section of this session. And this, of course, is the concept of quants. Now, what exactly are quants? Now, we realize that in inventory management, as we are managing our stock at storage location level, we are able to view stock quantities remaining in a storage location based on the actual unit of measure that that material possesses. For example, we can look at the storage location stock level of a liquid, and we can find that we have about 5,000 liters remaining in our storage location. So inventory management will give us the ability to use the unit of measure, which in this case will be liters, to measure how much stock is left in our storage location. But the situation is slightly different when we're using warehouse management, because warehouse management does not measure stock on a quantity basis using the unit of measure at all. But what warehouse management uses is what we call quants. Now, what exactly is a quant? Some say a quant is simply a quantity of a particular material, which is true to a certain extent, but in this case, we need to realize that with quants in warehouse management, we are referring to a quantity of a particular material with similar characteristics in a single storage bin. So there may be a quantity of the same material in a bin that has two separate batch numbers, for example. In that situation, we would actually have two separate quants in that bin. So basically, what warehouse management does is it measures stock in terms of quants. When you're looking at your storage bin, you are able to view the material in that storage bin in terms of quants. And now the system uses certain criteria to determine what goes into a quant. And these criteria, as shown in the slide, these include, this is the full set of characteristics. The system is going to take into account the material number, the stock type or stock category, the special stock assignment, the plant and storage location where this is relevant, and also the batch number. So the system is not going to combine into a single quant materials that have different material numbers. The system is also not going to combine into a single quant materials that have different batch numbers. But where we have uniform characteristics, where these characteristics are uniform, the system is able to combine those materials into a single quant. And when you're viewing your storage bin location, the system then tells you how many quants are available. So then, typically what would happen when goods are stored in an empty storage bin the system is going to automatically create a quant. And when the system creates a quant, or rather before the system even creates this quant, it's going to go over the materials that are to be stored in this bin. And it's going to go over the criteria that it considers when choosing whether to combine or separate materials within a quant. It's going to go over the material number, the stock type, the special stock assignment, plant and storage location, and the batch number. And if it finds that these characteristics or these criteria are uniform, the system goes on to combine these materials into a single quant. And if at any point it determines that any of these characteristics are different from one material to the other, the system is going to create separate quants in order to accommodate and to take into account the differences in characteristics that the system has identified. As these quants are created, the system assigns unique numbers to them, and also when stock is removed from these particular quants, when stock is picked from the quants, they are automatically deleted. Now, the concepts that we've looked at in this presentation give us a very solid foundation for our next session, which is going to be, that's going to be the second part of this video. That's going to be looking at goods receipts processes. We're going to look at our put away processes and the various scenarios that fall under that. But the foundation that we've built in understanding warehouse management, its structure, and how it integrates with inventory management are going to play a very key role in helping us understand the processes that are to follow. So it's always good to start from the bottom up to get a very good understanding of how these processes are going to be building from the structure, from the organizational structure that we've built in these very early sessions. And in the next session, we're going to be looking at the actual processes that occur in inventory management. But for now, we can take a break and maybe go through some of the concepts that we've touched on. I always recommend that it's important to revise the basics as we go, because as we go deeper and deeper into inventory management, into logistics execution with warehouse management, we realize that it may get tricky if you haven't really understood the basics. So for now, we can take a break, and then we'll proceed in part 2 of this video to look at actual goods receipt processes. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you learned something new today, and hope to have you join me again in our next session. Thank you very much.